Okay. All right. So, according to a Gallup article, only 26% of employees strongly agree that the feedback that they receive helps them to do better work. Yeah, this kind of feels like maybe performance reviews aren't what we thought they were, aren't the helpful hand in guiding performance moving forward. Well, if your last review has felt more like pulling teeth, right, or dodging landmines, then you're not alone because we feel this on both sides, both on the employee side as well as the leadership. And guess what? The fix is not fluff. It's not about diving in and providing a lot of flowery language around getting this done. It's about strategy. Now, good day, everyone. I'm Christina Green, your generational translator in the workplace. And today we're talking about building cross generational trust without triggering a revolt, right, from your team. All right, so let's go ahead and dive right in. So, here's the problem with traditional reviews. They tend to be transactional and not transformational. We tend to speak to the misses as opposed to the opportunities, right? We tend to lean on the metrics and the results and weigh them very heavily rather than accounting for the human experience, right? The impact moving through that process. Our general a generational bias starts to actually become part of the narrative, right? We believe that assumptions around their work ethic, are they truly loyal or dedicated or committed to the company, to the work that they're doing, right? Or, what is their communication style or their preferences? And we may feel one way or the other about that. Now, these are just a few ways that we are failing in many ways in our performance reviews and how we're showing up in this space. But, this can lead to mismatched expectations, right? To where leader and individual contributor, perhaps maybe they're not aligning around what it looks like, what the end result or success actually looks like. This can lead to conflict, resentment, a loss of engagement, and we know just overall, I'll just call it attitude, right? Eye rolls, arms being crossed, all of this presenting itself and really shaping the tone of the team. Now, if your review process is triggering anxiety or perhaps distrust or even silence, then you're not improving performance. You're just building walls. And this is going to lead you back to where you were before you started, right? So only 14% of employees say that reviews actually inspire them to improve, right? That's not a them problem, that's a system problem. And guess what? When it's a system problem, we can address this. We can start to adopt new ways of approaching our performance reviews to truly make them impactful and collaborative with our teams. Now, let me give you a little bit more about me. So, I've spent over 20 years in healthcare and healthcare leadership, and I've been managing teams, delivering these reviews, and sitting through these calibration meetings. And then I just hit a wall. I burnt out for many reasons, but definitely around performance reviews. As a Gen X leader, I've internalized a lot of this culture myself. I've said the phrases and I've heard these excuses around, or they're just too soft, or I had to tough it out, so should they. Why do they get an easier, pathway to a promotion than I ever have? And why even give the feedback because no one's listening anyway, right? They're treating it as if this is just a checklist that we do on an annual basis. Now, when we treat these reviews like a punishment and dismiss the generational nuances, we start to lose people. And in fact, we actually lose them long before performance reviews because if we're not showing up for our teams to try to help make them successful leading into it, they already know what to expect. And many of them are very pessimistic about what this actually means. What is this not just another circus, another performance, right? In order to provide a barrier to them reaching their goals. Now, this is not because they can't handle the expectations. I don't think anybody signs up to do a job with with the thought or the intention that they are not looking to be successful, right? It's because we don't handle them with care. When we don't lean into the human that is part of this experience, then we're missing the buck. So let's stop measuring people based on what they produce and start building teams that are resilient because they feel seen, heard, and valued. Okay, so now let's talk about each generation. So you've heard me talk a lot about each generation. So I want to make sure that this is all very important because every generation is going to respond differently and even enter into the performance review season and even ongoing performance management a little differently. So boomers, they value respect, loyalty, and experience, right? They have been working in the workforce for, 30 plus years, and they feel that that is weighted, that is a value that means something. That experience means something. So they want the respect. And when they apply this to their other colleagues, right, they're looking for that loyalty and that respect, right, within the positioning of within the team. They want contributions or recognition for their contributions. They're not looking for micromanagement. They have been doing work, if you will, for decades, and they do not feel that they have to be overly prescribed on what it is that they are to execute. This does not mean that there's not still opportunities to adjust the how, right? But we don't manage the how. That's micromanagement. We manage the why. All right. So Gen X also too, they value autonomy, right? The ability to be able to make decisions with the work that they're doing. They're good at pursuing a goal, and how they get there it should not be prescribed to them, but can they love to develop this pathway for themselves. They love the practicality of it, applying and step by step process. They will break that down and take great value or a great pride in completing that type of work. They want direct, no fluff feedback. Give them exactly, make the connections for them. Help them to understand what it is that they are in charge of and how it's going to contribute to the overall objective. Okay, and respect their time. They do not like you to run them around. And no one likes to be run around the mill, just with fluff or vague feedback. They're looking for direct and performance related feedback. Help them understand how they can be successful based on what is the measurement for success. Now, millennials are in the growth phase. So they're looking for growth, they're looking for purpose, they're looking for doing meaningful work and understanding how that's going to contribute to their overall goals, which are getting to the next level, and they're looking for promotion. So they bought into this idea that there is a corporate ladder, and we know that that ladder has evolved into more of a lattice, right? So it can be horizontal, it can be vertical at times, but there are many ways to pursue promotion. What they're looking for is a more of a coach-like style leadership, right? Giving them feedback and helping them to develop their career paths. So how can the work that they're doing today contribute to their work tomorrow, right? Contribute to their goals for tomorrow. Now, next with Gen Z, we're talking about a what they value essentially is transparency. They value wellness and efforts and actions behind mental stability, right? Mental health in the workplace, and putting that forth as not just something you say, not just a buzzword, but actually something that you do that is part of your culture. They're looking for real time input, right? So tell them what it is that they have the opportunity to continue to improve upon, but do not wait a week or a month later. Try to leverage the moment, right? Seize the moment the same day to try to provide them because they're looking for course correction. They are earlier on in their career, and so they're still trying to understand what this corporate space looks like. And so help them to understand how they can grow by giving them more closer to real time feedback. They also too do not buy into corporate jargon. They're looking for this humanized approach, right? We understand that they enjoy doing impactful work, meaningful work, and not something that's going to waste their time. They're very bought into contributions to the world and how it is that companies fit into understanding how to support their goals from an impactful perspective. So make sure you are having authentic communications with them, um, uh, that you're not being inauthentic, right? They're looking for you to be transparent, to provide them with the guidance that's necessary, and to do so closer to real time. Now, I'm not proposing that you have a different system for every single generation because that's ludicrous, right? But what you can have is a smarter system that actually flexes between each of the generations. And not to mention that flexes between each of the individuals who are on your team, right? These are just baseline data around generations to understand how to engage with them. This is not a black and white chart for how exactly to deal with every single person. Every single person is an individual, and they will have a different approach based on their own personality and preferences. So always ask them first. All right. Okay. So how do we use reviews to build a bridge and not a battleground? This is not meant to be, contentious in this space. And but so many people come into performance management, especially their performance reviews, with very heightened emotions. They're feeling one way or the other. And most actually are moving into this space either highly confident with their performance, and sometimes they get let down because maybe they've exaggerated what they believe that translates into, right? There's never a one to one, right? There's never a true understanding on both sides for the leader as well as the employee to understand like how they are going to fare through performance reviews because we will always rate ourselves much higher unless we are self-sabotaging. Um, but and our leaders also too have to leverage based on their own business decisions that have to be made, and so I won't go into that rabbit hole around merit increases, and everything is tied back to money, right? But how do we use this as an opportunity to really start to build a bridge with our teams instead? So we start to move from scorecard to strategy. Scorecard meaning that we stop weighing metrics higher than the human impact, right? So remember, these are humans who are doing this excellent work for you. And this work does not exist. Our progress, our results do not exist without them. So valuing their experience as they're moving through this process and the impact that they're actually having by delivering these results, right? So seeing the bigger picture, so you're focusing on the experience and the impact of the results and how to maximize that moving forward, right? It's a stepping stone you continue to build upon each and every year. If it's only based on the metrics and the results and whether or not, did they complete the race or did they get 75% of the way there, right? Understanding the overall benefit, right, or impact of the work that they have been doing for the performance year, what is that going to do towards the overall business strategy and goals, right? So moving from what's wrong to what's next. So if when we take the approach of what's wrong, we are putting people on the defensive. They start to move into shame spirals and performance paralysis. You likely see this after a performance review season where people are seem to be checked out or disengaged, right? This means that there was a misalignment of expectations coming into the season, and this should never be the case. Good leaders understand how to frame the conversation, frame expectations, help set their teams up for success, as well as balancing that with the business decisions that have to ultimately take precedence for when it comes to waiting, right? At the end of the day, right? What's wrong frames the conversation around judgment and not opportunity. But when we move it into what's next, we promote psychological safety. We are inviting our employees into the process. We are reinforcing their accountability and not perfection. We're not placing perfection at a higher rate than the accountability of actually completing and executing their role. We're empowering them to own the problem solving, right? This is also too part of the co-creation. So if we move from telling to co-creating, so instead of giving them another set of metrics and milestones to hit or possibly fail. So instead of using the performance as an opportunity to talk about where they can continue to grow, perfection is not the goal here, right? And if that is what your goals are reflecting, we have to realign our goals because no one is ever going to hit 100% of their goals. We've got to make them measurable, smart goals, if you will, right? But they've got to be reasonable. I want to emphasize the R in smart goals: reasonable, realistic to actually achieve, right? So if we are co-creating with them, we're creating a partnership that builds that commitment, allowing them to author what that future could look like, right? So we're building that bridge to ownership and to accountability. This is how you start to foster and support growth and building your leadership pipeline. This is how you start to help those individual contributors or even middle management to start to consider how it is that they can start to own a stake in the future. It's not enough just to establish goals, but they need to have the ownership and the accountability to seeing them through. Now, some tactical steps is you can use as ask versus assume. So ask them, how do you prefer the feedback? What's the frequency that you'd like to receive the feedback? Right? So ditch the jargon, get out of the corporate speak and start speaking to them as humans. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Don't feel the air, right? With fluff or language that would make you to appear inauthentic, but really more so speak to the human. This is a human experience, right? We are doing a business and fulfilling a business objective, but we are humans who are completing these tasks. Share your intent or the why behind sharing your critique, right? Your reviews. Help them to understand the why behind what it was that they were moving towards their objective, and also to what is the why behind perhaps maybe sharing your narrative, right, around their performance. And this will help to establish and actually make it less personal. This because you're being specific about maybe what the miss is, but here's the why behind it's so important or impactful. All right. And then also always follow up with, what support could I give you now? Right. Or what would that support look like to help you be successful moving forward? This starts to bridge the gap between making it a true conversation instead of just a judgment, right? Where leader is reporting back to employee around their opportunities or their misses. All right, so here are some really simple shifts that can help to start to build and build a bridge towards trust. So, one, you can normalize this two-way feedback. So, what's the one thing I could do differently as your leader? This starts to build the trust and engagement and psychological safety in this space, giving them a voice to be able to provide some levity, some input into their experience they're having with you as their leader. Now, I will tell you, this can be a double-edged sword because when you ask this question, you're going to get a response. Either one, if they feel safe enough to and they trust you well enough, what you do with the response to this question is going to determine whether or not you ever actually get honest feedback from them, right? How are they showing up with providing you with feedback on your performance with them? So it's not enough to just measure, do employee engagement surveys that are asking questions around their leadership, but it can be really helpful. And do not only ask this question annually at your reviews, but ask this question at the onset of establishing new objectives, right? New goals for the year, and make it part of your frequency that when you're meeting with them with their check-ins, always make this part of the conversation. Don't make it a checklist. Make it part of the conversation. Be authentic. You really want to understand and collect this information. Okay. All right. So make it personal. So you use words like, let's tie your feedback, to your goals and not just the company objectives. So, what are they trying to achieve as an individual along their career journey? How is the work or the objectives, the goals that are being established for them in this role, going to support their long term career objectives? Help them make the connections between today and tomorrow. Now, next, recognize their wins in their language, right? So, although everybody has, you've heard me say, every generation has their different preferences and nuances, always ask first. Here are some guidelines across the generations that might be helpful. For example, Gen Z might prefer more of a public affirmation, right? And whatever that looks like for you, but always ask them first. Nobody wants to receive a celebration or an acknowledgement in a way that doesn't speak into themselves, right? Or really support their growth. Gen X might they're looking for respect and for their effort, right? So whatever that looks like, as far as with either publicly or privately, you can send them, perhaps maybe just send them a note, but do not make it generic. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your effort. Make it specific. Let them know that their effort is visible and it is meaningful to you. So be specific in the acknowledgement of their contribution. Now, um, millennials, going out of order here, millennials, they're looking for a growth path, making connections between how it is that they can support their career journey, validating them for the effort and how that's going to continue to serve them along that journey, right? The boomers are looking for that loyalty to be acknowledged and to be appreciated, right? Boomers tend to stay longer in their roles and also too within the company. And so they're looking for that to actually mean something, to carry some worth. If you've listened to some of my other talks, you can use this as far as with, maybe it's uh, the number of years they've been with a company, sharing plaques with them around achievements, right? 5, 10, 15, 20 years plus, having some type of formal celebration. This can be very meaningful to boomers in this space. Now, lastly, is to swap out that stress-inducing language. Like, listen to yourself and the language that you are bringing into these environments, and make sure. I mean, this is not an exhaustive list, but here's an example of this. Instead of you didn't meet or you're not meeting expectations, try this instead. Let's walk through the gap and build a plan moving forward, right? Because this speaks to it acknowledges the fact that there perhaps maybe was performance was shortened, right? And then that, but also too, it's collaborative enough to say, listen, now let's talk about how we can land someplace better, right? In the future, and let them lead this process. Okay. Let them dive into the troubleshooting and the problem solving. This is back to that empowerment, right? Help them to feel empowered in supporting their own career growth. All right. So let's turn performance reviews into retention, right? Because the goal is that we don't want to lose anyone in this process. And part of doing that is by making sure that there is a bridge in communication that not only supports your individual teams, but ultimately this will support your bottom line. When we start addressing some of these performance gaps and start taking a humanistic approach to how it is that we are working with our teams, this is how we start to improve our retention, lower our attrition rates. All right. Oh, I see a comment. Let's see here. Performance reviews where meets expectations is the highest attainable result will never motivate me. I 100% agree with that. Right. So this is not just around meeting expectation, right? There's this this idea, and this is how the language that we even use around measuring performance, right? Um, and sometimes these are just business decisions, right? Because we have to quantify it in some way in order to support, downstream, merit increases, bonuses, a lot of different things, right? So this is how they quantify performance, so that way then they can measure it against a fiscal response, right? Janelle, thank you very much for your comment. All right. So your review process should be your retention strategy, right? If we're talking about trying to retain our best people, it starts day to day and how it is that we are engaging with our teams. The performance reviews essentially is just a summary. It's a summary and it's the big show, if you will, for proving ourselves as leaders and how it is that we are going to support our teams. But the battles are fought every single day with how it is that we are supporting our teams along the way. So what does that look like, right? When we start to provide feedback that is humanistic, is collaborative, that invite a conversation rather than implying a judgment or a punishment in this space, people are going to stay. They Because they feel trust is built in that area. They feel trust with their leaders. They feel that growth is visible. They can see the career path and how it is that they will continue to move in that space, right? They can see themselves staying there and growing in their career, growing in the tools and the skills that they're looking to leverage for those next steps. They also too the conversations that flow year round, and it's not just during review season. This is the theme. You cannot just measure and talk about performance on an annual basis or just based on your review cycle. The reason why there's so much energy that is around this space is because most of us are either so busy that we completely remove the accountability for having to and manage the people, manage the humans that are in these roles and take care of them along this journey, along the performance here, to make sure that there are no surprises when we get into the review season. Because people are feeling completely missed, they're feeling overlooked, they're feeling their efforts are dismissed. In many ways, leaders are feeling overwhelmed. They're feeling maybe this is just a checklist, this is something I do every single year. So the question is, are we putting enough energy into making sure that this bridge we are building throughout the entire performance year, is it going to stand, right? Is it going to withstand, the storms that come? Because performance review seasons, leaders are handcuffed to some extent with what they can do, right? And Janelle, to your point around meets expectations, that always feels like a slap in the face, right? Thank you for showing up and just doing the bare minimum, right? Especially in today's, language, right? Where we've got the culture that is moving around as far as with bare minimum in relationships and how it is that we're showing up in that space to be measured that way. Also too in the workplace, that starts to feel some kind of way, right? But as a leader, when you're taking the time to build those relationships and make this a collaboration and a conversation with your teams, then they start to understand the business side behind this, right? There's only so much that leaders can do, but what they absolutely can do is take care of their teams by supporting them through realistic expectations, by providing them with metrics to be successful, helping them to understand how you start to step out and be more visible in this space. This is how, and you take this opportunity on a daily, monthly, weekly, monthly basis, whatever is the frequency that matches your business and aligns with your teams. This is about being intentional and not just being prescriptive and micromanagement. Okay. All right. I think I jumped on a soapbox on that one, but y'all know me well enough to know I carry it around with me. So, my last point I will say is that people leave poor processes, right? And performance review cycles are unfortunately, a really good indicator of some of those poor processes. So thinking about how outdated they are and how we have the opportunity to continue to evolve in this space, right? And they don't necessarily leave poor jobs. They leave the poor processes that are not supporting their ultimate goals. And there's a lot of attention around how employers actually are helping to support the overall mental health of their workers. And this is across all generations, right? And performance review season is a perfect time to start having these conversations. So that way, with the next performance management cycle, you can start to address much of this. All right, let me go back here. All right. So that was a lot of information around performance management. But if you're ready for a leadership reset, if you're looking to build a culture that's rooted in trust, if you want to turn your feedback into fuel for growth for both you and your team, you want to inspire the ownership at every level, at every generation, and you're looking to transform conflict into collaboration, then use the QR code on the screen. I'm offering this free 30-day that free 30-day email course. This is 30 days to learn my best strategies and tools for retaining your top talent across a multi-generational team. Now, these are strategies and tools. There's lots of templates along this place, but the intention is to really give you tools and support that help you along your journey. Now, this means that in 30 days that you will start to have an arsenal of things you can leverage over the next performance year to start to re-engage your team, to start to bring them back in. And there's no better time to do this than around performance review season. So, and honestly, you can do this at any time throughout the year, but it's about leading with intentions as being an intentional leader as you start to approach your team. The and excuse me, use these tools as an opportunity to start having conversations. To There's templates in there around how to guide, how to move through some of these conversations, language that you can start to swap out. And we get so conditioned with using some of our corporate jargon that we forget we're talking to humans, right? And we are humans. And so, how can we start to mm, uh, create a more collaborative, a conversational space within our team? So, this is a free email course. If you like it, use the QR code, go ahead and connect, and it'll automatically start showing up in your inbox today or immediately as you start using it. Okay, now next. So we're going to continue this conversation around performance reviews, right? Around performance management. Next week, we're going to be diving into strengthening your team culture without leaning on HR, right? HR oftentimes gets the brunt of the work, everyone in the organization goes to HR when there is a problem, when there's a performance challenge. This is an incredibly busy season for them where they're having to navigate these conversations, certainly across the teams. But next week, I want to start diving in to say, how can, as individual leaders, as operational leaders, how can you start to leverage your opportunities within your own space to really strengthen that team culture, right? Without having to wait or having to look to HR to get you going. And many leaders are already doing this, and HR is taking on the burden of so much of this work. And so we want to be in partnership with them, but not heavily. We don't want to be a burden on them. So join me next week. We're going to start diving into some of that conversation. It's going to be at the same time. And of course, replays are always available wherever you're accessing this. So, and I appreciate you um, coming and joining me. All right. Oh, I see a question. Thoughts on the phenomenon of pet to threat? Oh, you will take me on full a full hour long session on this one, Janelle. I will message you separately or actually respond in the comments here, but that is it's a great question. So we're running out of time, but I will certainly get back to you on that one. All right. Um, okay. So that is all for today. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. Once again, I am Christina Green, your generational translator in the workplace, and I will see you back here next week, same time. Until then, you take care. I'll see you soon.